Welcome back, guys. So, interesting one today. I haven't thought a lot about this one compared to a lot of other topics. And I have mixed feelings about it, and we'll talk about it right now. So, is meanness really associated with being cool in Gen Z culture? Okay, let's find out. So, some say that there's some truth to that perception, right? That view, but it's more nuanced than Gen Z thinks meanness is cool, right? And there's a lot of things you have to take into account here. So, a few overlapping trends related to this meanness can make sharpness, detachment, or mockery look socially rewarded online. And why is that? Well, first there's irony culture, right? A lot of Gen Z humor relies on sarcasm, roasting, absurdism, emotional understatement. So being too sincere, right, too honest, can feel like socially risky online, right, in the online world, on the internet. So people sometimes they perform indifference, nonchalance, or maybe even something like cruelty as a shield to protect themselves. And there are algorithm incentives related to this, believe it or not. So platforms, they tend to reward conflict and dunking behavior, quote tweeting, having like some monster savage comebacks, right? Can really push up the engagement, right? It really drives engagement home. And these mean posts, they spread faster than your kind or ordinary ones. They really go viral. And there's a bit of status signaling too. So in some of these online spaces, there's this whole acting unimpressed, hypercritical characteristics, and just brutal honesty, right? That just get maybe interpreted or understood as like confidence or intelligence. So people kind of just associate it with these positive traits, which is interesting. And of course, there's the fear of vulnerability because young people who grow up highly online, right? They're under this constant social observation, like they're being monitored 24/7. And humor and mockery can become just natural defense mechanisms against any form of embarrassment or humiliation, right? So that they're gonna have their guards up. And there's a bit of this aesthetic or attractive detachment because certain trends, certain online trends, they glamorize and romanticize to some extent being emotionally unavailable, being emotionally detached, nonchalant, or cold, especially in like dating discourse, dating conversations, and meme culture. But you have to consider that there's also this sense of equally strong countercurrent in the Gen Z culture, right? So not everything's about being mean, not at all, because you have like this emphasis, this stress on mental health, which is a positive, inclusivity, right, which is another positive. So a lot of communities, online communities, feel welcome, right? They don't feel discriminated as much against or singled out. And there's a bit of emotional openness that didn't exist before, like during the time of millennials as much. There's mutual aid and support, right? Therapy language, therapy talk, and calling out bullying and toxic behavior in the online space. So they frequently do this. So if you say something that's harsh to another user, a bunch of people will jump on you. They'll start to downvote you to death. If there's like a thumbs up or a thumbs down button, in this case, thumbs down, obviously. Or they might even report you to mods and maybe get your accounts suspended, right? Or permanently banned off the site. So I've seen this kind of behavior before. I've been on the receiving end of it when I was trolling years ago, and soft trolling, nothing too dangerous. But yeah, it is a thing. So in a way, that's a positive. They're looking out for other people, which is great. It shows that the online community, in a sense, is becoming more and more safer over time. And so the same generation, right? They popularized really harsh meme humor, right? But they also normalized discussing anxiety at the same time, or setting boundaries and emotional safety. So they normalized and made all these other aspects of internet life and real life, okay to talk about. No issues. How ironic, right? So a useful distinction we should all make here is that, performative meanness online just gets rewarded socially, okay? So this is like a kind of subculture aspect to it. Sometimes there could be economic benefits if you're receiving obviously a lot of views, a lot of likes. If this performative meanness can help you go viral, you're gonna profit from it. You're gonna exploit the situation. So there's this kind of business aspect of this to consider. So in terms of digital marketing, it's something really productive and useful. And actually, cruel people, right? They're not usually admired in real life relationships, at least not long term. So, whatever you see online, any kind of meanness you're running into in the online space, don't take it too seriously. Don't be too upset, too offended, regardless what generation you're from, because things are not always the same on the internet as they are in real life. So meanness on the internet is something that could be more connected to humor, business, digital marketing, socializing, collective empathy sometimes. So there's that to consider. On the other hand, meanness in real life, right, by bullies and other evil folks, that's not admirable and gets people in trouble because people will report you, people will stand up to you, right? And it's just not the same. It's just like meanness used for totally different purposes. So offline, we can kind of interpret this as meanness being something that's done to hurt someone, right? And whereas online is a little bit more nuanced than that and doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. In a lot of cases, as we just discussed about, it's either neutral or positive. And a lot of what looks like cool meanness, right? Hip meanness is really just insecurity masked as confidence in some cases, social competition between users, or even we could say like, I don't know, what could we say? Entertainment logic from internet platforms, right? So think meme culture, think these subcultures, right? It's a kind of way for them to vibe with each other, right? And we know how big subculture and memes and jokes and that shared sense of humor is online. It's just growing over and over time. There's all these diverse communities. And to be honest, to be quite frank, this isn't something necessarily unique to Gen Z. Earlier generations had their own version of this kind of cool or hip meanness. For example, Gen X, they cultivated cynicism. So, everything was all about like, the worst is gonna happen. And even in stuff like music, there were songs about wars and, suicide and a lot of negative stuff, right? Think Nirvana, even think like, music acts and just songs and lyrics and whatnot, related to other aspects of cynicism and negativity. As for millennials, people from my generation, we kind of had more of this snark culture. So when you think snark, think something along the lines of sarcasm, right? So you're trying to get under someone's skin. And you know, for some millennials, this is cool. They love it. Whereas for others, maybe nowadays, they don't find it as attractive anymore. Sometimes it enters that, or we could say like it crosses the boundaries into toxic behavior. It really depends on the person. But this was a thing that we had during my time. Reluctant to say I've participated in it, as have many of my peers, but it's something I don't really appreciate or like later in life. I think it makes sense maybe to some extent when you're a teen or you're really young, but as a grown adult, I don't know. It just feels kind of childish if you were to ask me. And older teen cultures often prize aloofness or exclusivity too, right? Um, so Gen Z just expresses their form of this cool meanness through the internet's accelerated, style of humor and identity performance. It is what it is. It's something kind of interesting, and it shows how basically concepts and cultures can change over time. So yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to LSS. Thank you.